Welcome to A Breath of Fresh Career, Season 2, Episode 6. I am joined here by Rob Oliver. Rob is a Senior Research Analyst for the software practice at Baird. I've known Rob now for, I don't know, you could probably correct me on this. You're smarter than I am, but 40 years, maybe even more. I grew up playing hockey. That. What's that?
I said probably about that. I think I remember your stepdad tying my skates when I couldn't tie my skates. Probably that long.
Yeah, he just went down the line and just tied everyone's skates. You know, that's the deal. I grew up playing hockey with Rob's youngest brother, Patrick. His sister Kate was always around. Rob, it was always great having Rob around because when we played street hockey, we needed a goalie. As I mentioned, he's a senior research analyst for the software practice at Baird. He's a husband, he's a father, he's a hockey dad. We'll talk a little bit about that. Really fun-spirited, competitive guy, loves to cook and enjoys a great hike. Welcome to A Breath of Fresh Career, Rob. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jess. It's a pleasure. It's awesome.
We got to get one thing off the table here. What's going on with the Nighthawks jersey? I love it.
You know, it's funny. I did bring the New Haven Nighthawks shirt today just so we could have a bit of a brief positive memory from when there actually was pro hockey in New Haven.
Yeah.
Those were good days. Although, you know, you and I both know I think it really came to a peak nationally back in 2013 when you had Yale and Quinnipiac playing in the national championship. You know, my phone was ringing because I worked for a firm based in Wisconsin, and people were like, "Wait a minute, what's going on there?" And I was like, "Guys, you just woke up to it. We've had
it's in the water, man. It's in the New Haven water, just like the pizza. I mean, we got so much going for us in this area aside from the freezing, frigid, cold temperatures this morning. Winter's back. You know, the pizza capital of the world and some unbelievable college hockey today for sure. Are you guys done with tryouts for youth hockey?
We are. Yeah. I mean, the tryouts got shut down after the second tryout because I think there was a COVID exposure. So I think we're done with tryouts. But I mean, mercifully, my son's team, who's, you know, same age as your son, is Eli. So he's 12. So he'll be a Bantam next year. And so this is kind of the big move because they start checking. And but they had the tryouts and they mercifully were able to get most of the season in. So it wasn't a normal year by any means, but I think given what's going on, you know, around the country, I think we were just grateful to be able to get into I know I saw you a bunch of times. I'm just to be able to get into the rink, to have some semblance of normalcy. You know, anybody who was complaining about it, I kind of had to cast a strange eye on him. Just
exactly.
There's big world problems out there.
Our season ended. So Eli's 1 year ahead of you guys. So he already had a year hitting. I had a little bit of a oh man moment. I don't know, 10 games or 15 games or so ago, and he was, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet off the boards and just got creamed from behind, you know. And I'm like, I grew up just getting killed, you know, and you get up. He and I have a rule: make it to the bench. You know what I mean? And if you can't, then we know something serious. But he got up and the kid got like a 2 and 10 for that hit. But yeah, you'll see some of those instances next year for sure.
Hopefully mom misses those games.
What's that?
Hopefully mom isn't at those games.
Oh yeah. Cindy, my wife, Cindy, wasn't there either. It was in Norwalk, and we were up in that bar at the Sono Ice House overlooking the rink because that's the only place they let you view from there. It's crazy. Anyway, enough of all the hockey talk. We start tryouts next week if we can get them in, because there are cases of COVID popping up all over the place. But tell us about Baird in your own words.
So Baird is a 100-year-old, actually we're 101 now. It's a 100-year-old investment bank. It's based in Milwaukee. It is, I started my career on Wall Street in 1997, and I've been at Baird now almost 9 years. And Baird is by far the best and most unique firm I've ever worked at on Wall Street. It sort of defies all the conventional stereotypes of what you think about when you think about a Wall Street firm. It's so it's employee owned, privately held. It's a Fortune top company to work for. We actually peaked at 4, I think, some years ago.
Wow.
I write research on Salesforce.com. At one point, we were ahead of Salesforce.com, which the management would always rib me about that. I think they've jumped us now, and I think we're at 12. But for we're about, I think, 3,500, maybe up to 4,000 employees now. A significant portion of the business is wealth management. That's about 2/3 of the business, and the other third of the business is comprised of, in large part, our business, which is institutional investment banking and research. But it's just a fantastic firm. They really like a very low turnover. And, I'm based, as you know, here in Connecticut. And even prior to the pandemic, the firm had already committed to the idea that we want talent, the best talent, wherever it might be. Firm also has a no asshole policy, which is fairly unique in corporate culture. It's actually written into our bylaws. And, really, nobody gets hired at the firm unless it's almost like trying to get a job with the CIA. I mean, qualification for the job is a baseline.
There are no assholes in the CIA?
Well, no, there's probably a few. But insofar as you're going to do like 20 to 30 interviews before you get the job. So it's really more about fit, culture, both for the person coming to the firm as well as for, the firm itself and the people, as it is about qualifications for the job, because there's a lot of qualified people out there. So very unique place. I'm very fortunate to be there.
That's awesome. So for many of the listeners, including myself, so Baird, and you're a senior research analyst. You said 2/3 of the firm is focused in, you said investment banking, and 1/3 is comprised of research and some other investment stuff. Take us through your day. What's the day in the life look like for a senior research analyst?
So on my side of the business, we don't have anybody's money. We don't hold the money. The money sits at the mutual funds, hedge funds, pension funds, 401ks, the investment vehicles that many of your listeners will have their money in, mutual funds. Those are our clients. The services that we provide to those clients include, and this is where I come in, research. Now, most of these research teams, and even the biggest, most sophisticated mutual funds that, sponsor halftime shows for bowl games, even they have like limited resources in-house. So they really have to lean on outside firms. And so our hope at Baird is to be able to provide high quality investment research for investment professionals. And that's what we lead with. We also provide investment banking services to companies, and we really hope to be able to bring top quality private companies into the public markets that we believe can be disruptive. But for us, and really Baird's differentiation, and for me personally, it really leads with research. I mean, someone who's looking to go do their IPO, they can show up at the country club and say Goldman Sachs led their IPO, and that's going to resonate. And that's the name at the top quite often. Where we come in is that the firm knows that in order to be taken seriously from a research perspective, they really want Baird to be involved. Most of my time is spent researching companies, and then we could talk about use of time, but that's really, we spend a lot of time researching companies and trying to help clients make the right investments for their pension and portfolio customers.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about the sector you cover. You and I are in the same sector, and there are definitely some parallels there. Enterprise software, software technology, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about that sector, what you're seeing, and why it's exciting to you.
Yeah, that's why, Jess, I was excited to be on the podcast, and not just because I'd spend 45 minutes talking to you anyway. But I mean, you know this sector as well as anyone, and it's exciting. My view is there's never been a more exciting time to be involved with the software sector than it is right now. I've lived through a few cycles in software. I went through the software cycle in the late 90s with both client server, and then moving into that Y2K phenomenon where all their computers were going to shut down at Y2K. I lived through the kind of early days of internet computing in the enterprise, then hosted software, which became software as a service or SaaS, and cloud. So I've seen a few things, which, doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to be right in my predictions. But what it does mean is that, I think I know what it's not. Right now, there's a tremendous amount of excitement around software, and I think it's very justified. Really, what you have is um, companies globally right now are digitizing their businesses in ways that, as consumers, we see in how Amazon, Uber, Airbnb, Peapod, or whoever deal with us. And if you take the ease of interactions of those uses and you think every business to business interaction within the next 10, 20 years is going to have to resemble that, you can imagine how long of a way we have to go to get there. And those are the companies that I'm really focused on. And it goes from lead gen marketing, which I know an area you know really well, to Salesforce automation, to service, to fulfillment. And we can talk about some of these areas, but there's a lot that needs to be done. And when I speak with one of Baird's practices that's really strong is industrial. I sometimes do check with industrial companies, and they have a long way to go to modernize their software infrastructure.
Long way.
Really exciting time to be involved with this sector. I'm fortunate every day, very grateful to be following it.
You know what's crazy about industrial is you take a look at automotive, and it's pretty advanced. Automotive as an industrial category is pretty darn advanced. I mean, like everything down from the calibration technicians on the shop floor all the way through, their ERP and everything. But then some of these other segments, like I've got a client of ours that they're actually an ERP platform provider for like liquids, for chemicals, the chemical manufacturing space. They're still on spreadsheets. Some of these manufacturers. It's really incredible. Paint, some of the large paint, brands. They're still doing like, unga bunga old school, computing, and these guys would essentially swoop in, and they're like, holy cow, I didn't even know this existed. But a lot of those companies from in industrial manufacturing are stemmed from family. I mean, Ford was a family-owned business,
Sure.
I mean, like they were, Sherwin-Williams, I think, was a family-owned business. I mean, it's like, that they started off like, where the great grandpa was the founder, then the grandfather, then the father. Now, like the son and his kids are, running these organizations. So they're kind of like very used to doing things. But I'm also noticing a huge trend in the younger generations coming in and saying, wait a second, whoa, we can streamline this. So let's figure out some technology, some software that we can bring in that'll absolutely 100% streamline the financial process, right?
On that's exactly right, Jess, and that mirrors what I'm seeing too. And just to put a finer point on it, what I would say is that if you're a company that has not adopted software or technology, and someone tells you if you adopt this software, you're going to do more business, you're likely to consider that. So the areas where we've seen adoption first have been things like Salesforce automation, CRM software, things like that. But to your point, stuff like enterprise resource planning, back end. I mean, I talk to companies that have thousands of employees that are still managing things on, siloed, globalized spreadsheets. And so what happens there, because those back end office things, they're not traditionally thought of as driving revenue, right? And so what happens there is you have to get to a point where the pain of inaction becomes greater than the pain of action. And we're at that point. The pain of inaction right now is so high because you can be just cut out by your competitors or screw up and miss your financials.
Or a major pandemic hits and the light switches are flipped off and people have to start working remote and they're not set up that way.
Big deal. That's been a big driver, and that will likely continue to be a big driver here in term, I would think.
So I don't know how much you can say, but any interesting trends out there that you're seeing? What's next?
Yeah, no, the trends are really exciting. I mean, one of the trends that I would point to that excites me, and I think, you and I have talked about this trend and have some overlap here, I think for sure, is in marketing. I mean, marketing is, we just recently crossed over where digital marketing spend has now exceeded physical marketing spend. And that trend is only going to continue. If you think about it, and you just mentioned, the pandemic, some of these trends were already happening before the pandemic, but the pandemic has certainly accelerated them. I mean, just one I would point to is this really early stage trend of called social commerce. Traditionally, social media is a place where, let's say, I wanted to buy a new pair of skis, or we were looking to understand some new hockey skate. We might pop on and do a little research and follow some people who we respect on social media and get their take on this new product. And social media has always been a place of influencers, but there hadn't traditionally been a buy button right there. That's changing, and you're starting to see a buy button where these social media companies become actual platforms for commerce. And what that means is that companies that used to treat social media as, yeah, we need to monitor it and, have to have some software to manage it, now they have to treat it as a revenue opportunity.
They're monetizing it.
A lost revenue opportunity. So it's rising in importance within the marketing department. And we're seeing a lot of companies that are now responding to try to help companies really manage that. That's just one example, but marketing in general is really just exploding. I mean, I wrote a report a couple of months ago called The Second Golden Age of Marketing, which really goes back to this 2009 to 12 timeframe to talk about how marketing has really exploded. And the number of high quality companies that we're seeing today in this space is unparalleled, at least going back to that timeframe.
That's amazing. It really is. And I'm seeing a lot of this, the very same stuff. Let me ask you this question. So it's weird. I was kind of trying to think, and I wrote it down because I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. So in a lot of the organizations, and I'm not sure if Baird is one of the companies that falls into this, but you're seeing these pods develop, right? So you're the senior research analyst for the software practice. Do you have a pod of folks around you? Do you manage folks? What's your team made up of?
I do have a team, and I have a team that reports to me. Baird, we are, because we're employee owned and because we are extremely efficient with our, nobody at Baird staying at Ritz-Carlton's when we travel. It's all our own budget and our own dollars. So there's this esprit de corps about being tremendously efficient, because at the end of the day, that's, money that we could use to pay our colleagues and ourselves. So we try to be very careful. Unlike most of my competitors who follow software at bigger investment banks who have often 4, 5, and 6 associates working with them, I have one. So so he reports to me, and then I have one administrative associate who's based in Milwaukee, and she supports both our team and I believe 3 other research teams. So yeah, my team is small. It's I like to think efficient. I do sometimes dream about what we could do if we had a lot more resources, but I also know at the end of the day that our model at Baird is built for good times and bad times. And one of the things that really differentiates my firm is that we have not been prone to the wild hiring and firing cycles that tend to characterize Wall Street. And they always make the front page of the paper, market pulls back, layoffs happen everywhere. Yep. But my firm, tends not to do that and prides itself on that. And that really helps the culture. And so because of that, we have to keep that in mind at times like this when we're so busy and we could use other people, that we're just going to have to make do with what we have.
That's, and by the way, I'm uncovering all these new, startups and a lot of what I do as this boutique recruiter is, find these companies that are, $2 million in friends and family, seed funding and other companies that have taken an A round, et cetera. But you'll probably know those companies, by the way. But I could always tip you off on a couple companies that I'm working with as well. So let's talk about how you got your start, because you didn't go to school for finance. You didn't, how'd you get your start? I think you were an English major, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't,
The nutty professor.
I didn't exactly. Yeah. I mean, in fact, I didn't know what I wanted to do.
By the way, who does? Who does?
Yeah.
I mean, who the heck does? That's a joke. I think that's like a joke. That's like a wives' tale, right? If you can even use that term anymore. But like, you got to know what you're going to do. What are you going to major in? Who gives a shit? Let's just go to school, have a great time, be a sponge, learn as much as you can, learn how to be responsible, but sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but
no, that's right. And
true.
I mean, this is a unique situation because my dad well, but so, but the great thing, so my mom and dad were fairly strict growing up and, about like studying and grades and school and stuff like that. But when it came time to a career, they never once told us you have to do this or you have to do this or you have to have a job right out of college. So as strict as they were about rules, no TV on a school night, all this stuff growing up, once it got to the time for a career, they really were sort of open-ended about it, and so for me, that gave me a lot of freedom. It also made it a little bit frightening. So, I mean, I graduated from college in 1992. The economy wasn't very good. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I ended up going to teach English in Europe for 3 years. Lived in the former Czechoslovakia, was there when it's divided into the Czech Republic. I
got a Czechoslovakia hockey jersey, by the way.
Oh yeah. I mean, I got a couple too. I mean, those were times for a hockey fan to be living there. At one point, it was during the NHL strike, so I was going to see all NHL stars for about 50 cents a ticket.
Awesome.
That was great. But yeah, so so how I got my start on Wall Street was I had done a graduate degree in international affairs and I came in Slavic languages, and I came back and to the United States and was doing that in Austin. And I was thinking about getting a job with the U.S. government, and I didn't get the job. And I was sort of sitting around, trying to think, okay. And I had student loans. I was like, what am I going to do? And this was 1997, and I had a couple friends that worked on Wall Street, and Wall Street was going like this at the time. And they said, look, you do great at this specialized firm that we know of in Stanford called Soundview. And Soundview is a technology boutique firm, a small firm that was spun out of Gartner Group. Gartner Group's the number one research firm on technology. And so they're like, look, the culture here would be great. And my thought was, I don't know anything about stocks. What am I going to do? And they said, no, just go there and you'll do well. And I ended up starting as a temp. Started as a temp, running tickets back and forth between the trading desk. Within a few months, I worked my way over to the sales desk. And within a couple of years, I was calling on accounts. And now it was a very unique time where talent was necessary. Even, I suppose, marginal talent at that time, because I didn't know anything. But it was a phenomenal place to learn the business. And, to this day, I mean, other than Baird, it's the best firm I ever worked at.
You're the original Boiler Room, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's,
What a great movie. What a great movie. Let's talk about that. English teacher, teacher over in Europe, to senior research analyst at Baird. What's one thing you wish you had known before you began your career?
I mean, it's funny because as I went on with my Wall Street career, would encounter people who it's easy to burn out probably in any career. It's really easy to burn out on Wall Street. I mean, hours are intense. You're up at 5 a.m. If you're in a job like mine, there's no off hours. And so one of the things that Baird does very, very well is they really order people to take all their vacation time. In fact, on yesterday morning's morning meeting, the head of our whole firm hopped on and just reminded everybody, unless there was something absolutely mandatory, not to look at their phones over the weekend. I mean, that wouldn't happen at a big firm because they're really trying to manage that burnout. But, to use that as a setup to back up to your question, Jess, I mean, I took these years where I ended up starting on Wall Street when I was, 27, 28. And at the time, I thought that I was, woefully late and set back from all of my friends and at a huge disadvantage because they had started out of college and I would never be able to catch up. And when I look back now, I think I could have spent another year or two, traveling or doing something else. And at this point in my life, at age 50, when I have conversations with people, they all say, almost to a person, they say, I wish I had done that. So I'd say, obviously my parents were like, look, you can do whatever you want. We're not going to fund you. So I had to look for to make it work. And that's why I taught English. But I'd say that, not necessarily thinking that you have to move right into the power career, and trying to test your skills and go out and learn something about the world that you might be passionate about. And that may take you in a direction that you didn't anticipate.
That's awesome. Let's talk about the topic of COVID. How has your job changed throughout this pandemic?
Well, there's two answers to that question. On the one hand, what I actually do hasn't changed, which is I do research on companies. I model out their financial growth. I talk to clients about what I'm hearing and seeing in the market. I connect with private companies to learn what's happening with them and try to learn the competitive landscape and use that collective intelligence to try to help our clients make money. That hasn't changed. How I execute that job is completely different.
Let's talk about that.
I used to spend an average of 80 nights a year in hotel rooms. I, was a top frequent flyer with every airline. And I spent a lot of time on the road. In fact, one of the last trips I made before the lockdown was to Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, to see Baird clients. And so to go from spending that much time on the road to not traveling at all, and I haven't been on an airplane since last February, is a massive shift, not just, mentally, but also in how you execute and how you manage your time and your day. I'd say the biggest, and by the way, the time at home and being able to work and execute my job and be with my family. I have 3 kids, as under 12, is incredible. I mean, I'm going to look back on this time as one of the greatest times in my career to be able to be here for them. And, I'm in better shape. I'm exercising. I mean, you and I have talked about these things, but, there's a lot of positives to be taken out of this really sad situation. But I'd say that the area that is more challenging for me, and thankfully this is really a level playing field versus my competitors, is the ability to extract high quality information about what actually is going on out there. And what I mean by that is that I would go to a lot of regional software events, meetups, happy hours sponsored by user groups. So if let's say I write research on Salesforce or a company called ServiceNow, I'd find a regional user group sponsored by one of their resellers in Boston, and I'd pop into the event. And from that, I would be able to network, learn, customers would be there. I'd understand real world problems, and I'd be able to take these comments and kind of get beyond the anecdotal and to try to say, okay, does this match up with what the company's telling us? And those are much, much harder to do right now. Of course, virtual events are proliferating, and to a certain extent, they're helpful, but they're much more sales and informational events than they are useful for me in terms of being able to really build the relationships I need. So that's been a challenge, but for the most part, it's been great. And, I don't think there's any one of my colleagues who isn't a little bit fearful about returning back to the old days. We're hoping it's something that's a bit more hybrid. In fact, my boss has already told me, I don't think you're ever going to travel, as many days as you did before, 80 nights a year in hotels. So I'm happy about that.
Well, I mean, we've all been thrust into an environment where you have to, I'll just use this overused term, you have to research online, right? You have to research and proactively reach out to people and all that stuff. So, there might not, I don't want to call it wasted or wasteful travel, but you think about your day and how much you can get done in a day versus having to fly to Australia and New Zealand, which, by the way, beautiful place. Like I've shot skeet in the Sydney Harbor. It's incredible. But
you're right though. You're right.
There's
Get
so much more done.
A lot of inefficiency built into that. And that's what we're addressing right now. And I'll just give you one example just to that exact point is that, typically a Baird analyst would make, one trip to Europe a year, maybe. I think now, they're thinking, okay, can you make it every other year? I'm just speculating here because, the thing is, if I, after that trip I made to Asia, I was able to hop on Zoom and do 3 to 4, follow-ups with those folks. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer in-person engagement. I mean, I think it's critical. I know, that's one of your strong skill sets as well. And so,
thank you.
So I really think I'm looking forward to getting back to that, but I do think it's certainly going to be more of a hybrid situation, which I think will be better for everyone.
It's one thing that I've noticed in the industry as a recruiter, right, is that you're not really hearing like San Francisco Bay standards in terms of comp or New York or Chicago, because like it doesn't matter where you live anymore. Yeah. And it's such a candidate driven market today, meaning there aren't as many candidates willing to interview, and so many more companies hiring that it's super competitive that everybody's essentially fetching, higher comp ranges just because they have to in order to get them.
We saw a little bit, and you saw this as well. I mean, we saw a little bit of this prior to pandemic where we were already starting to see, I'm talking specifically about software, which is, really all I know about. But like, if you talk about the software industry, the technology industry, we're already starting to see talent start to say, look, we don't want to be in the Bay Area as much. And, a couple of examples of that are now, I think, abundantly clear to everybody would be Denver and Salt Lake City, the Silicon Slopes. I mean, both of those places saw tremendous growth in all sorts of innovation companies, clean tech and others, as well as obviously software. And so I think you take that model, and I think there's a lot of communities around the country that would hope to tap into that.
You almost don't hear about Austin anymore. It's kind of crazy. Remember, Austin, like, what was that? 8 years ago, 10 years ago was like, you had Austin Ventures, and you had a lot of these startups, incubators popping up there. And yeah, sure, it's still a primary area in the central region with regards to technology startups, but they're popping up everywhere else. I mean, everywhere else. I got a client in Tampa. I mean, like, that's like Gretzky going to play for the Kings, man. Board shorts and flip flops. Let's go. Yeah. What advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career like yours?
I mean, can I answer it in two ways? First,
love it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess specifically if you want to pursue a career on Wall Street, I would be indefatigable about networking. I think that is, I've seen it time and time again. Everybody's so busy, and and first of all, at least on the institutional side of the business in Wall Street, if you're not afraid to pick up the phone, that sends a clear signal to people that you'd be the aggressive type of person that they might want to hire. And I've seen it over and over where somebody just continued to be in front of someone, and finally they say, God, you're so persistent, I'm just going to send you up to the boss. And that person ended up getting hired. So I'd say being indefatigable about networking and being smart about networking. I mean, it's one thing to just pick up the phone and keep calling people, but it's another to know what it is that the organization that you seek to get a job with has as its common goals. What's its mission? What are its values? How can what you deliver fit into those values? We all interview a lot of people at Baird because of our policy where, we never want anybody to show up on the job and someone to say, hey, I didn't meet that person. So a person's going to go through a lot of interviews, and, I have no doubt that anybody who gets to the point where I'm interviewing them is qualified to do the job. So that's not even the question. The question is more, are they going to fit into the culture? And so you really want them to explain why it is they want to be there. And I think, I mean, you know this, you deal with so many entrepreneurs and they see a lot of resumes. And so to me, that's critically important. So do your homework, do your research, know what it is that you want to do. But I think even more importantly, know how that fits into the goals of the organization. I mean, the other thing I'd say kind of more broadly is, and this is the thing that probably has most benefited me in my career, because as you mentioned, I didn't have a financial background. I had not modeled. In fact, I had never modeled my own companies until I got to kind of later in my career. So what is it that qualified me to be the Wall Street analyst? I think it's, having this, Mark Benioff from Salesforce talks a lot about the Zen beginner's mindset. I think having this beginner's mindset is key, but for me, more important, it's about having a combination of confidence and humility, confidence in your ability, but humility to know that you don't know everything, and being dedicated to continuous improvement. Because if you're not dedicated to continuous improvement in your career, you're going to fall down at some point. And it may not be, and it's unlikely to be something you're going to see. It's going to be a blindside check, and continuous improvement's critical. I wish I were even better at it. I commit myself to it. I'm trying to instill it in my children, and my wife's thinks about that as well. So those are sort of the things that I would really point to.
The balance of confidence and humility. Holy crap, man. That's amazing. It really is.
Because if you're not confident, you can.
I feel Zen right now.
If you're not confident that you could do the job, why would anyone hire you?
Right.
But at the same time,
holy shit,
have humility to know that you don't know everything. And if you're not the type of person that could say, I want to learn, I'm eager to learn, and as I learn, I can make both myself and in turn this place better, why would someone hire you? So I look for that humility all the time. And in my case, I mean, oftentimes, and certainly in this most recent case, when we just brought an associate on, I mean, the people I'm hiring are like far smarter than I am in many areas of finance. So, this isn't about like humility about, working for me. It's a humility about like your approach to the job. And, that's also, I think, an ethos that really permeates throughout Baird. It's like, it goes into, valuing your coworkers. I mean, there are different things that everybody's going to be able to bring to the table when you want to be open to the different skill sets that are going to make everybody better.
Rob, that might be one of the deepest comments that anybody's ever made on a Breath of Fresh career. So I appreciate that, man. I think that goes a long way in everything. For young listeners who are still in school, it can involve them in class. It can be, your first job out of school. It can be, a senior associate, right, who might feel stuck right now and looking to, just bring the humility back for sure. Cause I think if that's something that we can all do, we're going to push forward. We're going to push through it. And this is a crazy time right now for sure. I love asking guests this question. There has to be 3 people in your life that have been most influential to me. I think I know who some of them are, but let's talk about, the 3 people that have been most influential to you.
Yeah. I mean, I probably would start with my mom and dad, just because of the way that they raised us. And it I think it goes back to that kind of, continuous improvement mindset. I mean, they, and the pursuit of excellence, really, this is.
Can I interrupt you? One of the things that I
Please.
know your dad to do so well, and I struggled with this as a father, but your dad, who I know more than your mom, but I also, your dad was never afraid to let you guys fail, ever.
Yep. And
that was like, but he was always there, right? You always looked up and he had the hat on, on the stand, but it was interesting, and we are so like, coddling today as a society that, my kid's 13, man. I'm 47 years old. I'm just starting to realize that I haven't been a dad before, and I'm trying to like think about some of the things that our parents did, that we can use, but it's a different world right now as well. I mean, like technology, you said it yourself, like no TV during school. Kids don't even watch TV anymore. Kids don't even watch TV. I don't really think your neighborhood's that much different than mine. We live in the same town, but like, you can't like let the kids go out. Okay, you got to come back when the street lights come on. First of all, we don't have street lights where I live, and it's pitch black. I mean, it's like pitch black. So that was our rule. You can't do those things. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. Let's talk about the three most influential people. But yeah,
I think the point you're making is the right one, though, because I mean, I think that's one of the things I valued about my parents was that, even though they were quite strict about academics and reading and stuff like that, they also, they really just, once we got to the age of 18, kind of all the rules went away and we were allowed to kind of do within reason, like what it is that we wanted, and they would be supportive. And you can see that that's evident in how the various Oliver children all ended up, doing different things. So, it's not like guys working on Wall Street. I'm the only guy working on Wall Street. So, but yeah, so I'd say that, the other thing I'd say is that, when I was 16 years old, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And that had turned out to be a really big moment in my life because as the oldest of four, my dad didn't know how to boil water. And so, as the oldest of four with my mom upstairs sick in bed, I needed to learn how to cook food, make lunches, organize the kitchen, do stuff. And I was a decent kid already, but it really taught some responsibility to me. And to this day, I mean, you mentioned, earlier, like hobbies and stuff like, cooking is still one of my biggest passions today. And it comes from that largely because I developed that skill set early. So those two. The other one I'll mention is that, I don't know if you know, I think you probably did know Judge Downey or Jackie Downey, but he's probably someone who I would certainly mention on that list. So, one of the most influential figures for me growing up was one of my dad's best friends who stood next to my dad for 45 years at the Yale Whale watching college hockey games, by the name of John Downey. And he had gone to Yale, but graduated, I think 12, 13 years before my dad, and was on a government mission flying over China, doing some reconnaissance, and was shot down and ended up being in a Chinese prison for 21 years.
Holy cow, I didn't know
that. When he was released in the early 70s after Nixon visited China, had never seen an interstate highway system, just, all, 20 plus years of American life that he just missed. But what was amazing, and he ended up developing Parkinson's disease later in his life, clearly because, he was mistreated as a prisoner, I think. But why I bring him up is because I spent so much time with him as a kid and later on as an adult. And, he had every reason to be bitter about a big chunk of his life that was taken away from him. And he was the opposite of that. He was kind and gracious and grateful. And he was not full of resentment. In fact, he barely would ever speak about those times to anyone. And he was incredibly generous. And he loved my kids. He passed away some years ago, but he loved my kids. And he was a huge hockey fan. And so we shared all of these things together. And, that taught me something about how to go through life when bad things happen to you. And in this case, I mean, he would have had every right to be a bit bitter about losing, 20 plus years of his life.
Absolutely.
So anyway, yep, Judge Downey.
Wow. Amazing. So it's awesome, and I didn't know that about him. Obviously my dad knew him as well. And you say 40 plus years of watching college hockey games. I think I can remember him coming to our games as well, with your dad. You know, he was almost like an uncle to you guys, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was there for every graduation, every birthday party, every event. And in fact, he was so, and then as we got to be adults, you know, the relationship changed a bit.
Evolved, yeah.
And he, you know, he had like a cottage in Nantucket. And so he would just, you know, just go out and use our cottage in Nantucket, which, you know, if anybody knows anything about renting places in Nantucket, you know that that's a pretty generous offer. So I think we were considered family. And, you know, we honored, he passed away, and my youngest, who is my daughter, Maeve, was born about that time. So we gave her the middle name Downey.
Oh, that's unbelievable. That's
but his number is retired at CIA headquarters in Langley. So if you ever visit the CIA headquarters, you'll see his number hanging there, right when you walk in.
Holy cow. That's awesome. That's a great story. Let's get back to work. You have somebody that a couple people that report to you, but you're obviously involved in interviewing. You said it yourself. There, 30 interviews that take place when somebody's hired at Baird. Let's talk about some of the key characteristics you look for when you're interviewing candidates. What do you look for? How do people stand out?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, and my situation might be unique because by the time somebody gets to me, they've already been vetted by Baird's Human Resource Department. And so I don't, mercifully for me, I don't need to check for things like, is this person a wacko on social media, or are they going to be a loose cannon or stuff like that? Like, sure, if things stand out to me, they want to hear it. But by the time somebody gets to me, they've already, at least had the stamp of approval that this could be a fit. And what they're trying to find out is how they work, who they are, their values. And so that's really what I spend time on. And it kind of goes back a little bit to what I was saying before, Jess, which is that, I want somebody, no matter how smart they are, no matter how bright they are. The associate on my team we just hired as a firm, has, came to the United States on a full scholarship at University of Illinois Champaign, went to work for Intel as a design engineer in the semiconductor world, then went to Haas at University of Berkeley for an MBA, then worked for a family office on the investment side, and wanted to pivot to follow software, and now is working for me. It's fair to say this guy knows a lot of things I don't know. So to me, it's really about that approach to working as a team. It's that approach to learning how you collaborate with others. All of those things are important. I want to learn about, kind of the way people choose to work. I don't really dictate to people the time or the exact hours that they have to put in. Obviously, there's certain things we need to do, but I want to know that, their passions too, why it is that they want to work in this particular sector or this particular firm. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to hear from them that the reasons why they're interested in Baird is not just because there's a job posting, but because there's something about the place which resonates with them. We have very little turnover at our firm, and part of the reason is because we do our job right, making sure that the people that we get in here are the people that are here because something about Baird appeals to them, as opposed to just, hey, I saw this job posting.
Great. Just out of curiosity, did you guys have to interview a number of folks for that hire? How many people do you think you interviewed?
I only interviewed 3 for this job, okay. but we have, so human resources would work with a group of, resumes and stuff. And then there'd be a hiring committee, which includes one of my colleagues in research, and working with one of our head admins, and then they would narrow it down to a bunch. And then at that point, they would come to me and say, like, okay, based upon the pool of candidates that we have, here's the way we're thinking about the types of hires. And we didn't, and that's another thing. And I don't know how valuable this is going to be. This is more in your world than mine, but I'm not an expert in this, but what we did was we kind of left exactly what we were looking for a little open, because we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves. So just to give you a concrete example, we knew we needed as soon as possible an associate to work on my team. Now, what we weren't sure of is whether we wanted to go the traditional Baird route of hiring somebody just out of college who would have a long life with the firm, who we could really mold and develop, or whether we wanted to hire someone who would be immediately plug and play, and who would add immediate value. And obviously, one of the biggest, differences when you're considering those two would be compensation, because the person coming in is going to be paid considerably more. And we ended up going with the plug and play option in this case, but we had a pool of candidates in both, just so that we were able at the end of the day to afford ourselves of, sort of a best athlete phenomenon. Hey, if the best athlete was somebody in that camp, and that might mean that, Rob's team set back maybe 6 months in its development, but in the longer term, Baird's going to be way better off, then that's something we would have done. A little painful, but we would have done it.
Yeah. Do you, so you get an interviews get set up. Are you looking at their resumes? Are you looking at their LinkedIns? Are you looking at both? What are you looking at?
I don't usually, I won't spend time really looking at their LinkedIn until kind of right before the interview, because our team kind of does most of that. Yep. Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is obviously really important. And the firm, my firm, which is, we're a 100-year-old investment bank based in Milwaukee. So, we're not
101.
We're not always at the avant of stuff, but, our team, we have been encouraged to use LinkedIn, more often just for things. And so, yes, so on LinkedIn for sure. And then, trying to and then maybe spend it if I'm, obviously with our recent hire, someone who had gone to Haas and worked at Intel, I don't need to check those out. But if they've worked for an organization I'm not familiar with, I'll probably pop on and try to figure out, okay, what is that organization? If they were there for a year, okay, I more want to know, okay, what was it about the place that made it only a cup of coffee? If they were there for 6-7 years, that's a good chunk of your career.
What kept you?
I don't want to know at that point, okay, what was it about that place that, kept you there for 6-7 years? What's the values there? And if they're similar to Baird, that could be exciting. If they're dissimilar, what is it that you're looking for in a change?
Amazing. Great. Any other projects you're working on?
We constantly, one of the things I love about this job is that, there's no exact blueprint. It's different every day. So, when I wake up in the morning, now there's certain things you have to do. Companies report their quarterly earnings. You've got to write research reports. You've got to update your models. You have to have an opinion. I mean, as one of my first bosses on Wall Street told me, no one wants to hop on the phone with you just to say that you're neutral on something. Well, they really want to know, are you excited about this? And if so, is it near term, longer term, or are you not excited about this? Because, there's a lot of companies out there to invest in. And so one of the things we try to do at Baird is really, I follow 20 stocks, and we try to find stocks that we think, look, we might not be recommending one of them today for whatever reason, but every stock on our list we think represents a very interesting opportunity. Otherwise, we wouldn't spend time on it because we don't have to. So I'm constantly looking for what are the next batch of stocks. So I spend a lot of time setting up meetings, in this case, Zooms with private companies, many of which I have ongoing relationships with. We're trying to look out 3 to 6 months to our calendar to figure out what events, both industry events and then company-specific events, we need to be attending that are going to deliver intelligence to inform our research. And then the other is we need to be looking at our clients. Typically I'd be on the road a lot, going to, Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, San Francisco, the Midwest, meeting Baird's institutional investor clients. Not doing that now. So how do we do that? I've got to let those regional sales teams know, hey, I am available on, these days in the next quarter to do Zoom meetings. I mean, just last week or the week before, I did 2 nights in a row of Asian and Australian Zoom meetings between 8 o'clock and 11:30 Eastern. And, that's an incredibly efficient use of time,
Absolutely.
To go from 8 to 11:30 at night,
Yeah.
I think for the last meeting, I was like tempted to switch, use a darker cup to throw a beer in instead of tea for the last meeting. But you know, it's an incredibly efficient use of time, as opposed to your point earlier. We're going to rethink some of these things about hopping on planes. That's a great use of time. So those are kind of the three buckets that were also part of our projects. And then I mentioned to you earlier, talking about this, you know, this golden age of marketing that I think we're experiencing. We're constantly, you know, at least once every few months, we want to put out a research report that's differentiated, that really talks about trends that we think are important. Because one of the things that's, you know, I think unique about Baird is that, sure, our clients care why stocks are down today and why their stocks are down next week. But really what they want to know is that, look, if I were to, you know, go away for a year or two, do you have me in the right stocks? Am I in the right themes? And so we want to constantly test our assumptions around that. And the way we do that is by talking to people and putting together research reports. So those are the main areas where I'm spending, you know, time, and there's never enough time.
We've spoken, thank you for that, by the way, but we've spoken a little bit about advice. We've talked about what you look for in candidates. We talked about a bunch of stuff, but what advice can you give our listeners, aside, work included, but work, life, entrepreneurship, family, the whole deal? Wax poetic on this one.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think I'd say that, look, the pursuit of excellence, you know, doesn't necessarily have a win-loss record. You know, it doesn't necessarily have a save percentage. You're going to lose, you're going to get scored on. You know, again, I was a goalie, so yeah, right. And you know, and you have to pick yourself back up. And the sooner you forget about that goal, the better off mentally and physically you're going to be able to stop the next one. And the reason I'm saying that is because, you know, I think oftentimes, you know, in our culture, and sadly, you know, we see this sometimes in youth sports as well. There's a lot of focus on, you know, this winning and, you know, getting the kids out there, and, you know, and even though people talk about team, there's this idea of, you know, state championships and all that stuff. But if you step back, like, you know, the lessons that are most important that I see resonating, you know, with my son and my children who play team sports is, you know, the best coaches are the ones that are teaching them how to be excellent in life. And that involves, you know, knowing how to lose. That involves knowing how to be a great teammate. That involves knowing how to pick yourself back up and to have humility, but also have the confidence to know that you can go out there and get the job done. And constant improvement. And as I said earlier, I mean, if you commit to a life of continuous improvement, I mean, the software world that I follow really had a tectonic shift in how software was developed when they moved from what used to be called waterfall releases, where we'd all work on software and then we'd release it, and then it would suck. And then people would be like, oh God. And instead, you know, and then you'd have the developers would blaming the operations teams, and the operations teams would be blaming the developer. Yep. And right.
And you got the marketing team working on something that they're going to have to change, you know, once it's redeveloped. I mean,
exactly. And you got to go back to the drawing board. So this concept of DevOps came along, which is where developers and operations are working continuously together around the software creation process up into and including after the time of release. And it's really had a dramatic change in how software is developed. And I guess I'd use that analogy to think about, you know, how, you know, you also, you know, improve yourself. This ethos of continuous improvement and integration is one that, you know, I aspire to always be committed to.
Again, thank you. I always ask this question. We're coming to the end here, but every single person that I interview on A Breath of Fresh Career, I ask, if you were in my shoes, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
Yeah. I think you hit on all the questions. I think you hit on all the big ones. I mean, you know,
let's talk about hiking, man. Come on. You're a big hiker, you know.
Yeah, maybe passions outside. Yeah, I mean, like hiking, it's funny. I did this presentation for for Beecher School this past week, our local middle school, because they're trying to get the kids going home and they're all on Zoom. And so they ask parents that have passions or particular things to add if they can do presentations to the kids. And I saw the list come around, and the first one was like understanding COVID. The second one was how to make sense of the pandemic. So I turned to Adrian and I said, these kids need something else, man.
Yeah.
So I put one together on 4-season hiking and how to get inspired to go outside. And I had like pictures of like, a solo winter setup, going up Mount Rainier, going up Mount Washington. And it was great. Now, the mistake I made was I showed a picture of my middle guy with the bear box where you protect your food when you're on a multi-day hike so the bears don't come and raid your tent. And that opened up a full line of questions about animals. Really, every question from these 6 to 8 year old kids was, how many bears have you seen? Have you ever seen an elk? Have you ever seen a mountain lion? Have you ever seen this? So
Never been attacked by a bear.
Yeah, we're spending a lot more time on the animals. But yeah, I think that's it. I think it's having some passions outside of my job. I spend a lot of time with other human beings. Now it's not in a physical way. It's more, on Zoom or on the phone. And they're clients, and it's a business relationship. But, invariably it comes down to, human interactions. And some of my best relationships are people I've known 20 plus years. And if they know I'm in the car when we're talking, they know I'm probably, driving to a hockey tournament or driving somewhere. And those relationships just get stickier. But yeah, having passions, and I love going to the mountains, but having passions outside of work is also, it's a nice stress relief, and it's also just makes life richer.
Dude, I don't know if you know this, but you do know that I build the rink in the backyard.
I see it when I drive, and when the leaves come down, you can actually get a nice view of it.
You got to get over here next year. The problem is that like there's so much hockey. There's so much hockey that like Eli's skating before bedtime or before school sometimes, or he didn't really do that much because he's a teenager and he's starting to sleep a little bit later, and we're like, get up, we got to go to school, and then they're on the ice 3 times a week and homework and all this other stuff. But long story short, there was a guy in town that called the town on our rink and complained that we had a rink in the backyard, if you can believe that. He actually complained that we were providing outdoor activities for children during the months that no one wants to be outside. I mean, you can't make this shit up, man. You can't make this shit up. I told my wife, I was like, oh, let me see this guy in the back part of the cornfield area. When
I trust the town filed that in the appropriate file.
No, they actually came out. The building inspector came out, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. I got a letter. I saved it. I'm going to frame it. I have this barn in the backyard that I've since, because of obviously COVID, converted to a home office. And, that was like the skate house, and, the guy wrote a letter about the rink and the complaining of the rink. And also that people were living in this 300 square foot barn with no bathroom, but because he saw a lot of movement, I guess, coming to and fro. It's, hello. But it was just like the biggest joke is people just can't keep their mouth shut. It's like that guy would not get hired at Baird because the asshole radar would go off in a heartbeat. Man,
not to mention, Jessica's Baird is based in Wisconsin, so there's a lot of hockey. There's a lot of institutional hockey.
Oh yeah.
Probably as much as any Wall Street firm I've ever worked at.
For sure, 100%. What in closing, where can our listeners best connect with you? How do you want people to connect?
Yeah, people are welcome. I'm available on LinkedIn. You can find me, Rob Oliver, at Baird or RW Baird.
I'll put a link in there.
Yep. Put a link in there. That's fine. People are welcome to email me, roliver@rwbaird, BAIRD.com. And just bear with me, but I'll certainly get back to you. And I'm just happy to help and provide advice or anything I can do. I mean, you know, you're one of the reasons why I was psyched to be on this podcast is just because, you know, whenever you and I talk about software, I mean, there's just so much tremendous overlap, and I can barely mention a private company that I think is potentially disruptive without you saying either you know them or you work with them and stuff like that. So, you know, I just, you know, also, you know, I'm thrilled because we're friends, but also just really wanted to be supportive of the fact that, you know, you do tremendous job and, you know, do tremendous work, and you're in a sector, but you also know the sector cold, which is really critical to be able to add value. I mean, that's probably one of the themes that coming out of this thing is really know who you're talking to, and, you know, and you do. So, you know, that's why is another professional reason why it's really an honor to be on here.
Oh man, thank you. I can't, that's very kind of you, and I appreciate it. I really do. And we'll do it again, man. We should make this an annual thing for sure, because the world of software, enterprise software, is certainly going to change, right? So we'll look to do this again in 2022, right? And see what's changed with you.
I'll leave you with one funny story, Jess.
Please.
So I was getting a document signed at our lawyer the other day, just random document, and you had our lawyer's husband on the podcast, and so I'm saying to her, oh, you know, I'm going on Jesse's podcast. I know Steve was on. He was one of the first guests. And she said, oh, I listen to Jesse's podcast all the time. I said, you do too? She said, well, yeah, you know, sometimes it happens by accident, you see, because I have my podcast listener and I listen to like Wait, Don't Tell Me from NPR. And then right after that, I have Jesse's podcast. So sometimes I'll fall asleep listening to Wait, Don't Tell Me. And I'll wake up listening to Jesse interviewing someone. And I'll be like, oh, this is fascinating. And it keeps me up.
Oh, great. I've got my podcast guests, significant others, waking up in the middle of the night hearing my voice. That's not good.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not good. A little refinance, I guess, on your end, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, I appreciate you, man. Happy holiday weekend. Happy Easter.
Yep.
And we're going to talk soon for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate you having me. And thanks so much, and have a wonderful weekend. Look forward to.
We'll go down to New England Brewing.
Yep. Looking forward to that. Weather's getting nice, and we could all use a little bit of from work, from sitting in these Zooms all day. But this one's been a pleasure. And any way I can be helpful to your viewers or listeners, just certainly let me know.
Thanks, brother.
All right, buddy.
See you, man. See you. Bye.